Biggest history mind ducks? During the Mongol Empire in the 13th and 14th centuries, Mongolian forces were fighting Germans and Japanese at the same time, and these two peoples had no idea of the other's existence. This wouldn't be attempted again until the 1940s. The pyramids were as old to the Romans as the Romans are to us. The time difference between when Tyrannosaurus and Stegosaurus lived is greater than the time difference between Tyrannosaurus and now. All my Tyrannosaurus vs Stegosaurus dino fights hate you and your facts. I've posted this before, but here's my favorite coincidence from history. On the 30th of March, 1981, there was an assassination attempt on President Reagan. Jerry Parr was one of the Secret Service agents on duty. In fact, he was the one that pushed President Reagan into the limousine after hearing the gunshots. While driving back to the White House, standard procedure since at the time it was believed the president was uninjured, Agent Parr noticed that the president was bleeding and ordered the limo to immediately turn around and go to George Washington Hospital. This decision no doubt saved President Reagan's life. Agent Parr had wanted to be in the Secret Service since a young boy, when he watched a 1939 movie called Code of the Secret Service, with a young unknown actor playing the part of Agent Brass Bancroft. That actor made some more movies and eventually entered politics, becoming governor of California and later, President of the United States. Indeed, a young Ronald Reagan played a role in a movie which caused a young boy to make a career choice, and then saved the actor president's own life 42 years later. Several hundred years ago, a group of Maori set sail from New Zealand into the unknown South Pacific. Whether by luck or skill, they landed on a remote archipelago known now as the Chatham Islands, some 500 miles away. They lost all contact with their fellow tribesmen on New Zealand and formed a tight-knit, egalitarian community known as the Moriori and lived in peace for over 100 years. Then, one day in the 1830s, a group of Maori, who had by this point established contact with English settlers, hitched a ride on a seal hunting ship and sailed back to the same island. Seeing its potential as a settlement, the Maori, as was their custom, slaughtered or enslaved every single Moriori. The Moriori did not fight back, they had never known violence. Guns, germs, and steel? Am I right? Not exactly historical, but it's 100% mind-ducking. In Australia, the Aboriginal Kuuk-Thaayorre people use compass directions for every spatial cue. For example, there is an ant on your southeast leg. The people's traditional greeting is "Where are you going?" essentially requiring that each person be familiar with the cardinal directions at all times. Perhaps as a result, these people have been shown to be more skilled at dead reckoning than any other population. When asked to order a set of picture cards, they instinctively arrange them not from left to right or right to left, but from east to west, no matter what direction they are facing. Shortly before the assassination of Abraham Lincoln by John Wilkes Booth, Lincoln's son Robert was in New Jersey at a train station when he fell off of the platform and onto the tracks. Immediately a hand reached down and grabbed his collar, pulled him back onto the platform, and saved his life. Who was the man who saved him? None other than Edwin Booth, the older brother of John Wilkes Booth. Edit. It's worth noting that Edwin did not recognize Robert. In fact, it was the other way around. Edwin was a renowned actor and Robert immediately recognized who he was. Edwin did not find out who he had saved until much later. Today you, tomorrow your father, will be shot in the head. I always liked the comparison between Lincoln's and JFK's butt-nation. Pulled this from some dumb conspiracy site. Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. John F. Kennedy was elected to Congress in 1946. Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1860. John F. Kennedy was elected president in 1960. The names Lincoln and Kennedy each contain 7 letters. Both were particularly concerned with civil rights. Both wives lost children while living in the White House. Both presidents were shot on a Friday. Both presidents were shot in the head. Lincoln's secretary was named Kennedy. Kennedy's secretary was named Lincoln. Both were assassinated by Southerners. Both were succeeded by Southerners. Both successors were named Johnson. Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Lincoln, was born in 1808. Lyndon Johnson, who succeeded Kennedy, was born in 1908. John Wilkes Booth, who assassinated Lincoln, was born in 1839. Lee Harvey Oswald, who assassinated Kennedy, was born in 1939. Both assassins were known by their 3 names. Both names are comprised of 15 letters. Lincoln was shot at the theater named Ford's. Kennedy was shot in a car called Lincoln, made by Ford Motor Co. Booth ran from the theater and was caught in a warehouse. Oswald ran from a warehouse and was caught in a theater. A week before Lincoln was assassinated, he was in Monroe, Maryland. A week before Kennedy was assassinated, he was in Maryland, Monroe. My genome has been twisting and folding, recombining and mutating in a continuous string of organisms traceable back to an original replicator molecule. If I don't find someone to reproduce with, the chain will be broken after billions of years of successes. Now you made reproduction sound like a solemn duty, duck. No. You've got the wrong idea. If you don't have kids, here's the truth. Billions and billions of years of evolution have served one purpose and one purpose only. To make me. I'm not a broken link in a chain that was meant to stretch for eternity. I'm the apex of a mighty pyramid. That John Tyler, 10th president born 1790, has 2 living grandsons. When newts were first discovered, they had no idea there were other humans on the planet. My great uncle Edmund and his friend Hap flew B-29s during World War II. They flew bombing raids over Japan, and they were shot down and taken as POWs for 8 months. 40 years after being rescued, Hap goes back to Japan to try and stop the constant nightmares he had been having ever since his time as a POW. He ends up meeting the pilot that shot him down, and they become friends. Yours is way cooler, but it reminded me of my best personal small world story. Once upon a time, my car was stolen. It was later recovered in a part of Ottawa called Sandy Hill. Fast forward about 4 years and I'm teaching ESL in Korea, out at an open mic night at a local bar. I meet this guy and his fiancée and chat with them as travelers do. I ask where he's from. He replies Ottawa. I say no way. I used to live in Ottawa. Where in Ottawa? He says Sandy Hill. I laugh and say I had a car stolen that was found there. His face goes blank. He asks, was it a white 88-91 Honda Civic? I stare at him. Yes it was. He says, yeah man, I jacked 2 of those. Let me get your beers for the night. I had no idea how to react. It was too long previous and far too surreal to be really mad. So I accepted the drinks and we ended up hanging out for the rest of the night. TLDR, while traveling in Korea I met the guy who had stolen my car 4 years earlier in Ottawa. During 14th century Korea, Admiral Yi single-handedly stopped the Japanese invasion during Japan's conquest of Asia. In 26 naval battles, he didn't lose once and achieved flawless victory. Every battle, he was outnumbered, sometimes 100 to 1. There were many battles where he takes a handful of ships, 13, and defeats hundreds upon hundreds. He was able to do this because he was a master tactician and used every advantage he could find, whether it was wind direction, tide changes, boat formation, and natural geography. His achievements in history is unparalleled, yet not many people have heard of this man due to his birth surroundings. How he can win over 25 naval battles where he was outnumbered usually 10 to 1 in dominant fashion is one serious mind duck. Reminds me of Koreans playing StarCraft. APM equals ahoys per minute. The temple at Gobekli Tepe. In Turkey, there is an empty, uninhabited region overlooked by a ridge of mountains. On a hill at the base of those mountains is a temple unique in human history. Gobekli Tepe is a series of temples, built on top of each other over time. The oldest of layer of temples is more than 11,000 years old. Do you understand how old that is? That's not just 7,000 years older than the pyramids. 5,000 years older than the first cities in the Fertile Crescent. It's 1,000 years before agriculture. The builders were nomads, living off of herds and foraging. It's before writing. So the whole thing was built by people whose knowledge had to be learned entirely in their lifetime and committed to memory. Can you imagine building a house with a group of people, when there aren't any diagrams or written instructions on length or weight? And the project took more than just your lifetimes? Okay, maybe there were measured lengths of rope or something, but still. So it existed almost alone on Earth, with no large permanent human settlements. Not in the middle of a city, or even near one, or at a time when our concept of cities even existed. There are barely signs that people even lived at the site. It indicates humans who used it lived in nomadic villages nearby and it stood mostly empty. It was unimaginably unique at the time. We only think it was a temple because it was full of larger than life statues of humans and dozens of different animals. The concept of a bigger than life statue indicates respect and reverence, when it was believed that humans weren't sophisticated enough at the time to see themselves as gods, or worthy of worship. We know that Gobekli Tepe was in continuous use for more than 3,000 years, and then buried. Not in an avalanche, not in a fire or storm. By hand. The entire ducking complex was buried by hand. We know from the striations of earth that it was carried in from the land around and dumped. And it wasn't destroyed first, the buildings was intact. Only 5% has been excavated. It's been picked at for decades because of competing claims on archaeological rights. Who knows what else is in there?